name is Sarah Everhart, and I'm a legal specialist with the Agriculture Law Education Initiative. This is a video on adverse possession and how to protect your property. This video is meant to provide general information and should not be construed as providing legal advice. For advice on how these issues might apply to your individual situation, you should consult your own individual attorney. The Agriculture Law Education Initiative is a collaboration between the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law and the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources at the University of Maryland College Park. Through the University of Maryland Extension, the statewide non-formal agriculture education system, the collaboration partners with the School of Agriculture and Natural Sciences at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. The Agriculture Law Education Initiative is an Empower project. It brings together two universities of distinction to form a new collaborative partnership. Okay, let's begin. Adverse possession. Adverse possession is an ancient legal doctrine. It's what we commonly refer to as squatters' rights. Many people with large tracts of lands are unsure of the exact location of their property lines. They may think that a tree line or a boundary that's been used by neighbors is the actual legal property line, but this might not be the case. This confusion can result in a building being built across property lines or a neighbor mistakenly fencing in another's property. Let's imagine that you and your neighbor are confused about your property lines, and this causes your neighbor to fence in land that is actually part of your farm. Your neighbor then uses the property as if it is his own, and the mistake is not discovered until 21 years later. Your neighbor now has a viable claim to own the section of your property enclosed by the fence through the legal doctrine of adverse possession. How do we prevent adverse possession? We must first understand what is needed to establish a claim. For a claim of adverse possession to be successful, the person making the claim must show possession of the land for the required period of 20 years, and that such possession has been actual, open, notorious, exclusive, hostile, under claim of title or ownership, and continuous. We'll now break down what each of those terms means. The use must be actual, open, and notorious. This means that the use must include some demonstrative indications of use, such as mowing the grass, erecting a building or a fence, or planting crops. The use must be such that it puts the true owner on notice that the land is being adversely possessed if he or she happened to walk or drive by the land. Actual verbal or written notice is not required. The actions of the adverse possessor are sufficient to deliver the notice to the true owner, as long as they're actual, open, and notorious. Many people get confused about the term exclusive use. To use the land exclusively does not require that you guard the acreage day or night, nor does it require that you never let any other persons onto the property. It simply means that you use the land as your own, and in the way that a true owner would use it, such as excluding trespassers. This intent to exclude must be shown by actual visible means, such that it would put the true owner on notice. To use the land in a hostile way means to use it without the permission of the true owner. When there is no evidence of permission, and the possessor proves the other elements of adverse possession, a presumption arises that the possession is hostile. If the true owner can show that possession was pursuant to his or her permission, the presumption of hostility is rebutted and the claim is defeated. To use the land under claim of title or ownership means to use the land as if you had actual title to the property. And the use of the land must be continuous for the 20-year statutory period. Successive periods of adverse possession may be tacked together to meet the required 20-year time frame. However, tacking will only be permitted when the time periods to be tacked consist of the use from the previous owner and the next successive owner of the property without a break in use. When a successive owner receives the property being adversely possessed must either be included in his deed or be adjacent to the property he is receiving and described as being part of the property. This is a visual representation of the different elements that are needed to be proven in order to sustain a claim for adverse possession. The burden of proving the elements of adverse possession is on the person making the claim, and the determination of whether a claim is sufficient is a fact-specific inquiry. This means that every situation is analyzed by the courts and depends on the facts. The Maryland courts have held that something more than mere occasional use of land is needed, but the type of use depends on the character and the location of the land. For example, the type of usage necessary to adversely possess a parcel in a residential subdivision is much different than the type of usage necessary to adversely possess a piece of rural property. Okay, back to the issue of how we prevent adverse possession. What if you discover that for the last 10 years your neighbor has been planting a row of crops on your farmland? What should you do? To prevent an adverse possession claim, you must assert your claim as the true owner to this land, either through physical re-entry or by taking some action to reinstate your possession. This means either demanding that the planting ceases, establishing a leasing relationship with your neighbor, or sending notice to your neighbor that the crops are there with your express permission. To conclude, it's important to understand adverse possession because you don't want to let your property boundaries be affected by inattention or inaction. Know the locations of the legal boundaries of your property and make sure that no one else is using your property in a way that could form a claim for adverse possession. If your property is being used, you must take action to stop the clock from running. Thank you.